Hello everybody, this is a response video to the Extra Credits Design Club series Durlag's Tower Level 1, in which they used the CPNR Combat Puzzles Narrative and Reward model to review the first level of Durlag's Tower and Baldur's Gate. I'm going to be reviewing the second level, so let's jump right in. Having defeated the 4 dwarves at the culmination of the puzzle on level 1, we descend and find ourselves in a small circular room. The combat component of this room, none. The puzzle component, there are 4 exits, 3 of them locked magically so they can't be picked or opened with spells. Narrative, there's pictures on the floor indicating some of the aspects of what we're going to find on this floor. The narrative is also served by 4 couplets on the floor. On the north, O Kiel, clan prince of this dark tower, you made your death your finest hour. On the west side, too young to fight except to fall, here died my son, young Fjernabal. On the south side, moved ne'er by rage and ne'er by anger, cold as the traitorous doppelganger. And on the east side, Islan, my wife, I love you still, 'twas just your form they made me kill. These couplets set the narrative tone for what's coming in the dungeon. They also give us some clues to further developments in the doppelganger situation in this dungeon, serving the overarching narrative there. As a reward component, there's no physical reward in this room, but it gives us a lot of closure for questions exposed in the previous level. Having gotten this far, we're now starting to feel like we are going to be told what exactly was happening here.
If we proceed through the only open door, marked by a portrait of a doppelganger, we'll come to a room full of statues, some of them doppelgangers, and a doppelganger on the rug in the center of the floor. The combat component of this room is none, but the puzzle component is that the doppelganger on the rug can be clicked on to see that it is looking at the statues on either side. This is a clue to investigate the statues and find that they're switches that can be used to open 2 of the locked doors in the original room. Also part of the puzzle, at the very back of the room, if you explore far enough, is a trapped globe. The trap prompts you to investigate the globe more closely, while still allowing the player to feel the sense of discovery. The narrative in this room comes in the form of the statues that seem to have been placed here haphazardly, perhaps moved from other places, and in storage, prompting us to think what may have happened here. And for reward, the globe is full of potions and spells that should be useful in the dungeon ahead. Upon turning the west statue in the statue room, we agree with a grinding sound in the distance, and returning to the entryway we find a door open on the west side, and inside a room with dummies in it. Combat component in this room is none for now. Puzzle component, the dummies have some strange behavior. You have the option to talk to them, but they say nothing, and they interact like people but also like containers, and the room is full of traps. Clearly there's something important in this room. Attacking the dummies causes a doppelganger to ambush, with an interesting combat where the room is filled with a stink cloud, causing the players to fight in confined quarters in unexpected circumstances, probably with the whole party within the cloud already. The narrative component here is not much until we remember the couplet from the opening room. That couplet said that here died Fjernabal, and this may be an indication that Fjernabal died in training.
The body in the dummy room seems to confirm this, and the couplet found in the hall that the doppelganger came from also confirms that this happened, reading, "Soft walks the traitorous doppelganger into my dear son's practice chamber."
And the reward for this room, the dummies as containers are full of magical ammunition and spells and potions that will be useful in the dungeon to come. Turning the statue on the east opens the eastern door in the entryway, the one with the portrait of Islan, Durlag's wife. And as we step into that room, we see an opulent living quarters, which we can surmise is Islan's room. The combat component for this room Once you've started to loot some of the tables and things, a doppelganger in the form of Durlag enters, and the doors lock, meaning that if you're exploring this room with just your rogue, this combat can be somewhat dangerous. But it's easy enough to flee from the battle before it begins. Puzzle component. Ward stones found throughout this room are necessary for solving the puzzle to open the final door from the entryway. And also, if these ward stones are placed incorrectly in the room, fireballs are triggered. A clue to the puzzle to this part of the puzzle is given by the doppelganger, who, upon entering the room, triggers one of these traps himself, taking damage before the combat really begins. Narrative. We get some of Durlag's character from the things that he says about Islan as he's coming into the room. We also see that the doppelgangers are still working on some sort of puzzle in the area and triggering traps. In the passage that the doppelganger comes from, we find another couplet. Foul mimic of the mortal man, 'twas in my shape they killed Islan. The narrative also ties into the reward of this room. Many of the tables and shelves are full of spells and scrolls, indicating that Islan must have been some sort of mage. These spells will be useful to us as we explore the dungeon further. At this point, we return to the entry room where there is still one locked door, and the overarching puzzle of these 4 rooms involves the ward stones taken from Islan's room and the dummies in the dummy room, and some combination of putting those ward stones on the dummies and attacking them opens the door. With the final locked door in the entry room, the one with the portrait of Kiel, open, we can proceed into the throne room. Combat component for this room, none at first, but after proceeding to the back of the room, sitting on the floor before the throne is a helmet, and here is a puzzle joined with the combat. Taking the helmet causes a doppelganger in the form of Durlag to appear. Shortly thereafter, Fjornabal and Islan doppelgangers also appear, and combat begins with the door to the entry room locking. If the party has tried to escape prior to the combat, the party may be split in 2, with some remaining in the room. The room fills with AoE spells that can prove deadly to the party as they knock them unconscious, and the greater doppelgangers that are now present do significant damage. One strategy may be to escape to a safe part of the throne room and use summon monsters to carry on the fight. And another may be to simply escape the room completely with one character who grabbed the helmet, triggering the AoE spells and then returning to the fight once the AoE has died down, making the fight significantly simpler. Once this puzzle is solved, the player has a moment to investigate the helmet that they received. And this helmet is pretty powerful, protecting against critical hits, as well as panic and boosting the morale of the wearer. And so that's for the reward component. In the narrative component, we see in the dialogue of the doppelgangers in this portion that Kiel was killed by doppelgangers impersonating his father, trying to get him to put his guard down. And the bodies in the throne room confirm this treason.
Either before or after defeating the doppelgangers, the player can notice 2 doors on the way into the throne room, on the left and the right. They're both locked, but can be picked unlike other doors on this floor. Proceeding through the right door brings the player to a room full of switches. This room has no combat component, and the puzzle component is merely the ability to use these switches to open doors throughout this level. It's not strictly necessary to solving this level of the dungeon, but is very useful. The narrative component, Kiel was suspicious and innovative enough to lock down this floor with a switch room just off of the throne room. This confirms what was said by the doppelganger in Durlag's form, who told him to let his guard down. The reward for this room, free movement through the dungeon. Leaving the switch room, the corridor hooks to accommodate a trap betrayed by a corpse. This corridor leads to the treasure room, where there's no combat encounter, and where the puzzle if any, is the discovery of a shortcut to his land's room and some traps in the floor. Narrative, again, we see that the stronghold was very wealthy and successful and then fell suddenly despite its prosperity. And the reward for this room, strangely, for a treasure room, none. As we are now long overdue for a combat encounter, opening the next door leads to an immediate ranged attack from an unseen opponent. This enemy can be kited back to save the rogue with the rest of the party, and shakes out pretty easily. But the remainder of the combat in this room is a puzzle to be solved. The room consists of 3 bridges crossing a river of magma. These bridges bottleneck the party as they attempt to engage the ranged combatants that occupy the room, turning this fight into a puzzle requiring some level of ingenuity. The fight on these bridges also serves an important narrative purpose, allowing the player to fight in an arena that is of historical significance to the Dwarven family that lived here. Presumably these bridges were built over the generations, the shabbiest on the left first, and then the second more robust, and finally the third, presumably during Kiel's very prosperous rule. And so this fight becomes an experience in the history of the dwarves who once occupied this place. Beyond the trinkets found on the slain enemies, there's also a trapped tile in the back corner of the room that serves as the primary reward for this room, containing significant amounts of gold and some useful spells. With the bridge room clear, the player is now drawn to a corridor from which many of the doppelganger enemies had emerged. This corridor winds surprisingly harmlessly back to the Tomb of Kiel, where we find the body of Kiel guarded by doom guards. There's no combat encounter in this room unless you disturb Kiel's treasures. The puzzle here is that the chest is trapped and the player is faced with the decision whether to loot the chest or leave it be. If looted, then the 4 doom guards guarding Kiel's body will attack, and this becomes a significant combat encounter. As for the narrative, we see that this is the tomb of Kiel, the Legion Slayer and the Lord of this fortress. He's buried here and guarded with undead warriors who have so far withstood any doppelganger intrusion. More of his story is contained in the magic items hidden in his chest. The reward here is Kiel's equipment, his morning star and buckler, each a mixed bag of curse and blessing. On the other side of Kiel's tomb, the player comes to a circular room with a staircase descending. The combat here is avoidable if the player is able to solve the puzzle. A trap on the stairs, which releases a group of skeleton warriors, like those formidable foes from the level before. Also part of the puzzle is a secret door leading to the true entrance, presumably, that cannot be opened with lockpicks. The narrative, whatever's down below, was worth hiding well with a secret door and trap and skeleton warriors. And the reward, none but the exit when the puzzle is finally solved. Now let's go back to the fork in the throne room and see what happens if the player takes the other path. Taking the left door from the throne room brings us to the torture chamber. The combat for this room is an ambush from behind when you reach the teleport chamber beyond the torture chamber. A pair of doom guards who attack and are a formidable fight. The puzzle, a chasm with no apparent crossing, a ward stone found in a trapped pot, and glowing sigils that can be clicked on to teleport across the gap. The narrative, Kiel wasn't necessarily as nice a guy as we might have imagined. He had a large and well-used torture chamber just off of his throne room. The teleport gap is presumably there to prevent people in the torture room from escaping. And the reward is the ability to teleport, as well as a goblet full of blood that can be identified as Durlag's goblet, a cursed item. It comes with the note, "Drink my fear," which is fitting because while the goblet can heal the drinker, it also causes them to be panicked. When combined with Keel's helmet from the throne room, this drawback is mitigated completely. An additional piece of the overarching puzzle from the teleport room is a note saying, "Face my demons," which is accompanied by the trigger for the ambush. And we're beginning to see a theme with "Taste my fear, face my demons," that we're being brought through the life of Keel or Durlag, one of the two. Teleporting across the gap in the teleportation room brings us through another door to the urn room, or the shrine room. In this room there is no combat, and as for the puzzle, there's hidden and trapped containers everywhere. For the narrative, apparently Keel was somewhat religious. He has a shrine and a temple area in his tower, but not religious enough for it to be as near his throne room as his security measures and his torture chamber. Upon searching the back shrine area in this room through a hidden door, we find a statue that contains the glyph that we need to open the final door to this level of the dungeon. So the reward for this area, the trinkets that we find in the other parts of the shrine, as well as the final exit key for this dungeon. Speaking of which, in the hidden shrine we find another note: "Seek no exit." So, in direct rejection of that admonition, we now enter the hallway heading toward the exit. As a change of pace, this hallway has a brief combat with some ghasts, who are most likely largely destroyed by the fireball trap that they set off. The puzzle, the trap should be removed. Narrative, this hallway appears to be some sort of prison block, perhaps used for containing undead, or this close to the temple for sacrifices. And the reward, none, except for access to the exit. And so with stone in hand, we proceed to the locked secret door. It opens with an ominous rumbling. We enter the true exit chamber and find one final note from Durlag: "Know my madness." And with that ominous instruction, we are prepared to descend to the third level. If anyone else would like to apply the CPNR method to the third level of Durlag's tower, I'd be happy to see it. Otherwise, I might get around to it in about 9 months. This is James signing off. Was that an explosion?